Dr. Theo de Jager is the executive chairman of SAI. We'll get a little bit more background from him in a moment. But the foot and mouth disease disaster is now becoming, threatening to become even greater, because you have two sides really boxing it out. On the one hand, you've got farmers who are perhaps being pragmatic, trying to save their herds or what's left of them. On the other hand, you have the rigidity that always is part of when the bureaucracy gets involved. And now we have to find a way through all of this that doesn't destroy the long-term future of South Africa. We'll get some insights from Dr. de Jager in a moment. Theo, good to be with you. I've had some interesting engagements with the Minister of Agriculture, off the record, not in the public domain, but I'll get into that in a moment. Let's just establish your credentials first of all. When we first met, it was at the World Economic Forum in Davos, and you were there representing the World Farmers Organization as the big boss there. Just for those who don't know your story, tell us a little more.
Thank you for having me on your program again, Alec. I've spent a lifetime in organized agriculture. I farm in the Letaba district just outside of Tsenin. And I've served on every level of organized agriculture. I was a chairman of a local farmers organization in Trigafsdal of Kulaku to do land reform issues in Limpopo. I became the president of Agri Limpopo around 2006. And then I served as the vice president of Agri South Africa for about 8 years. And then I became the president of the Southern African Confederation of Agricultural Unions. And thereafter, I served as president of the Pan-African Farmers Organization in Addis Ababa. And then I became the president of the World Farmers Organization in Rome. And now I commit my efforts and my time to the Network for Family Farmers, SAI, and we operate across Southern Africa. We also have big footprints in Zimbabwe, Zambia, Mozambique.
So I know it's horrible for someone to be asked to blow their own trumpet, but in this instance, it's quite important because the agriculture minister is listening to another voice. He's not listening to your voice at all, and he's listening to the voice of Dr. Gideon Brucher. Is that the way that you pronounce it? Who was with the World Organization for Animal Health. Do you know him? Do you know this gent?
I know him. He's a legendary veterinarian. He's one of those guys for whom we must one day build a monument. He used to be the director of animal health in South Africa, where he dealt with quite a number of foot and mouth outbreaks when we still managed it in zones. And then he was recruited to the predecessor of the World Organization for Animal Health, and he became the chairman of a technical committee that fought this disease. He was very central in fighting the disease in Brazil, where they had a much bigger challenge than we have today. We only need to vaccinate 14 million cattle. There they had to vaccinate close to 300 million cattle. And he steered those farmers through the whole process up to the 29th of May last year, when they managed to regain their foot and mouth free status. So he knows what he's talking about, and it's not that much a different voice. We believe in the same principles, but of course he's an animal health professional, and he looks at it from the global perspective, whilst the voice I represent are those of farmers who are really in trouble, where we are now losing more or less 2-3 dairies every week. And every day, farming enterprises are going under because they cannot cope with this disease.
It sounds like you've got somebody who's taking a broader perspective, maybe a longer term view. But at the other hand, there are real practical things that are occurring on the ground, and that there's a disconnect between the two of them. And the Minister of Agriculture appears to be very hard in his view that you got to look at the longer term view. And I suppose there's just a gap between the two. So what are you suggesting to John Steenhuisen and indeed those who, even Dr. Gideon, is there not some room for the two of you guys to meet?
For sure, no. Alec, farmers will not do stupid things for short-term gain and ignore the longer-term implications of it. If I could advise the minister, I would have said, Dr. Bruckner is not far from your office in Cape Town. Take him for a cup of coffee. Sit down and don't tell him. Listen to him. What Dr. Bruckner says is, to regain foot and mouth free status, we need to vaccinate the whole national herd. That call was made by the minister, and I salute him for having done that. But then the minister claims that Dr. Bruckner is adamant that the state must control every aspect of this vaccination campaign. And I spoke to Dr. Bruckner myself last week after I've spoken to our colleagues in Brazil. And our colleagues in Brazil said, we know Dr. Bruckner. He's a hero around here. But he allowed us to vaccinate our own animals. Dr. Bruckner himself said, there's no way they could have vaccinated that number of animals had they not put the syringes in the hands of the farmers, the farm workers, and volunteers. It is not necessary to have a state veterinarian to go out to every farm. It does not work that way. It's not even necessary that you use government's logistics to get the vaccines onto our farms. The private sector must play a much bigger role than what the minister and his department is now prepared to sacrifice to them. If they are really adamant that the state must control every aspect, they have already transgressed their own rules. You see, the vaccines are not made by government. It's made by private sector in Turkey and in Brazil. They package it, they ship it here. Government wants to receive it on this side, and it's not necessary. We have much better storage facilities in private sector. And then the logistics to send it out to every corner of the country. I mean, there's a network of veterinarians, close to 300 of them, all over the country. But there are not that number of state vet offices. Why do they want to control everything? It is because Dr. Bruckner says it's a state-controlled disease. And this is where they are clutching on to. But state control is actually better understood when you translate it to Afrikaans. There's a big difference between staatsbeheer and staatsgecontroleer. What we want them to do, what we are pushing them to do, and what we are in court for now, is to say, if every ampule, if every dose has a barcode, government can only receive the list of barcodes and they will know exactly how many doses came into the country and where it is. And then when it's distributed, they can be notified. This batch has now gone to the Northern Cape. That batch has gone to the Boland. This batch has gone to Southern KZN, to this veterinarian or that veterinarian, because every veterinarian has the storage facilities to keep this. And they know much better than the state vets what's going on our farms, especially in the dairy industry, the stud industry, and the commercial meat industry. And then when a farmer goes to his veterinarian to get those ampules, he can just scan this QR code or barcode, and he can scan the nose print of the animal to say this dose is going into this animal, and they will have a perfect record. This is how it was done in Brazil under the auspices of Dr. Bruckner. Dr. Bruckner is not saying the state must control everything.
Sure. Well, there was a piece that was written by two economists, Johan Kirsten and Wandile Sihlobo, which the minister sent me and said, read this, because these guys actually know what they're talking about, not like Theo de Jager, Tsai, and the others. And they rely heavily on Dr. Bruckner. But it seems like it might be a bit selective then. Is this what you're telling me?
When I received that opinion piece by the two economists, and I immediately realized these guys have been asked for political purposes to write this piece. They say they quote the law and the regulations, but then they quote very selectively the international regulations, and they use these words state-controlled. And this is why I called the Brazilian farmers and thereafter called Dr. Bruckner. And Dr. Bruckner said, this is not what I said. Because the opposite happened already, not only in Brazil, also in South Africa. I mean, in October, when the last vaccines came in from BVI, from Botswana, it went via the RMIS, the Red Meat Industry Services, who bought it at 60 Rand per dose. It went to Karan Beef, and they vaccinated the feedlot. That's already not state-controlled in every aspect of it. So I'm afraid that article of Johan Kirsten and Wandile Sihlobo will come back to haunt them.
There's also part of it there that says you have to be very careful that you don't bring in bad vaccines. In other words, they were talking about some illegal vaccines from Kenya. So if it's a free-for-all, the farmers are actually unwittingly perhaps going to introduce some really even bigger problems into South Africa. What do you make of that argument? It sounds sensible when you're on the outside.
Absolutely. No, Alex, that's so. We have seen the smuggling of vaccines, especially from East Africa, where they have the O variant, which we do not have in South Africa. So there is a real danger that smuggling of vaccines will bring foreign stuff in, and then that will spread because our animals are not resilient against those variants. And it's a criminal offense to bring in vaccines. But this is not what we are calling for. No one has called for that. What we were calling for is the state can certify certain vaccines, and they've done that now. There are 4 vaccines which are certified for use in South Africa. The one is BVI from Botswana, and that is a very short-term solution. It has a shelf life, or it has an efficiency in the body of the animals of about 3 months. And this is what we use to vaccinate to slaughter. This is typically what we would use in feedlots. It is not a very efficient vaccine because it is water-based. But then we have our own vaccine, of which 12,900 doses have been launched at a big party at the Agricultural Research Council by the end of last week, and another 20,000 have been promised for every week. We are looking forward to receive it on Friday. Then there are the vaccines from Turkey, Dulvet, and the vaccines from Brazil, the Biogenesis Bago vaccines. And all 3, the South African, Turkish, and Brazilian vaccines, are oil-based. So you only need to vaccinate once a year. And it is vaccination to live. This is typically what we would use to prevent the dairy stock to attract this disease, or what the stud breeders are really longing for, to make sure that this disease would not affect their animals. But once approved, there is no reason why the vaccines cannot go from the manufacturer to their local agents. And both these two laboratories in Turkey and Brazil had their own local agents. And the minister committed about 12 times that he will work via these private sector networks. But then came the letter onto social media where Biogenesis Bago said the Department of Agriculture have made it very clear to them that they are not prepared to work through the local agents. They want to position themselves as the agent, and they terminated the agency agreement. Now, there's something highly irregular going on there. And although the minister denies any knowledge of it or any involvement in it, to get into the clear, he should just write a letter to Biogenesis Bago and say to them, I have no problem of yours working directly with your agent, and then they can monitor it from the agent. But they are not doing it. They want to be the agent. And of course, there's the issue of price. We know that the vaccines come in for around 45 Rand per dose. We know that RMIS paid 60 Rand a dose in October last year. The two agents both told us that they can land it on our farms for around 55 Rand per dose. But then on the day before Christmas, the department said that it will cost farmers about 300 Rand. And immediately the farmers asked, where will the difference go to? Also, when the Director General made a remark that he still has to put out some of the aspects of the distribution on a tender. You know, farmers hear tenderpreneurs, and they hear slowing down the value chain and lots of profits. And this is what they are terrified of. For us as farmers, our absolute priority is to find the shortest route between the manufacturer and our cattle. And we know that route is a private route. Once it goes into the government system, we are going to struggle. And no one will know who will get it next, where will it go next. Over the last week, over the last few days, we saw outbreaks in Mbekweni between Paarl and Wellington. And you know, we have those mega dairies in Malmesbury. The one has 10,000 cows, the other one 11,000 cows. It's 60 kilometers from there. And we had this outbreak in Mosselbaai, in Grootbrak. Now that is on the doorstep of the heart of our dairy industry, all along the garden route. If this disease would get into the dairies in the garden route, our country will not recover again. So we are holding our hearts for it. We know, well, we have spoken to Biogenesis Bago. On Friday, they said to us, we have 1 million doses packaged. We can put it on the aeroplane tonight. It can be in South Africa on Monday. On Tuesday, it can be on your farms. Then on Monday, they said to us, we are ready to send it off. We will even waive the condition of payment first. There's a flight tonight. We can have it on that flight. You can have it on Wednesday, which means it can be in the Western Cape on Thursday. Now, the farmers want that. The farmers are aching to have their hands on that vaccines. But they are waiting for a signature to approve the permit. And the local agent for Biogenesis Bago already filed this application nearly 4 weeks ago. Friday it will be 4 weeks ago. And still we don't have it. And I know the state works differently, but farmers who are suffering simply have no patience with this administrative bungling and red tape. We feel this is not how we are going to win a war.
Just bottom line it for us now. The agents say that they'll land it on your farm at 55 Rand. The department wants to control it and land it on your farm at 300 Rand. How do they justify? How does John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance still, he must be doing his party untold damage with what's happening here. How does he justify the difference between 55 Rand and 300 Rand? On the basis, you said a little bit earlier, from Dr. Gideon Bruckner, who's, as you say, been misquoted, and he says himself he's been misquoted with the official line. What is the official story? Where does 55 suddenly become 300? Are there some snouts in the trough here?
I think there are serious efforts to get snouts in the trough. I think this is probably what's holding up the process more than anything else. You see, Minister Steenhuisen takes a lot of lightning for things which he might not even know about. But the buck stops with him. He is the minister. So originally, he said, there is no such a thing that the department demands 300 Rand per dose or per year, until we could show him on an official letterhead of the department, this is what they have sent out to the media on the day before Christmas. And then he said, or his spokesperson said, this is per year. But the fact is that you only need one vaccination per year. Or let's say this annual vaccination will happen twice in the same year. Then still, it is 150. It is still 3 times more than what it should be. So we have serious questions about the communication between the minister and his department. This is not the only example of where there seemed to be serious miscommunication. There's also the issue of this agency agreement between the foreign manufacturers and the local agents. Very clearly, the manufacturers got the message that the state in South Africa would not work via the private agents, whilst the minister committed to that. Somebody have given the message. And I don't think it's that difficult for the minister to sort it out. He can pick up a telephone and call the CEO of Biogenesis Bago and said, who in my department gave you that message? If it was not he himself, because we know he was in a meeting with the CEO on the 22nd of January. But then there's also the whole issue of state control. The minister consistently said already since November that government is ready and eager to work with private sector. The problem came in that his department is not ready or eager. So where did the message go wrong? And you know, Alec, farmers are watching the news a few times a day because this is the best communication they have, this and social media. And they read about serious stuff going wrong in the lines of command and control in our country. I mean, we have a military exercise in Simonstad where the commander-in-chief, the president, says the Chinese or the Iranians, they cannot take part in this exercise. But then somebody ignores it, and they do take part. Now, if it happens in the military, what are the chances that it can happen in the Department of Agriculture? Does the minister really have the command and control over this department? And farmers are very skeptical. They say not a single one of the senior officials who were responsible to protect our foot and mouth free status have up to now been charged or being brought before disciplinary committee. Not a single one. This deep state in the department is so strong that farmers fear that the minister simply does not have the handles on them.
And you can imagine from a political perspective, the ANC is cheering them all the way to the elections, to the next elections that are coming through. But let's just leave that on the side. Just give us an update. I thought that John Steenhuisen had a group of wise people who were advising him, and given the note or the paper by Kirsten and Sitlobo, he would have put Dr. Gideon Bruckner on that grouping. You say he's not communicating, and presumably he's not there. But who is in the wise men? Who is advising Steenhuisen, who's a townie? I mean, he's not a farmer, so he's learning this as he goes along, presumably.
Look, Alec, I think there are three very wise and brave things which this minister did, and we give him full credit for that. The first thing was in June last year, because he's a townie, he agreed to set up this task team of the best professionals, veterinarians, scientists, to advise him on the science of it. Gideon Bruckner is not there because he's retired. You must know he's already close to the 80s, if he's not in his 80s. And I don't think he wants the burden of serving on it, but he said that he is always available for any kind of advice they might need of him. And the crisis with that task team is that not one of their recommendations was adopted by the department. The department's senior officials did not even attend their meetings. So they are being ignored. And when it was called out, the whistleblower, also a legendary veterinarian, Dr. Dani Oudendal, got fired from that task team yesterday. And farmers are still a bit bowled over by this. Farmers cannot believe that someone like Dani Oudendal would simply be kicked off. And the reason the minister gives for kicking him off is that he refused to sign a confidentiality agreement. Now, Dani Oudendal, you know, he's been on our farms for 40 years. He is probably one of the very best and experienced veterinarians when it comes to food enough. And he runs this network of veterinarians of close to 300. The second big thing the minister did was to change the policy to say there will be blanket vaccination. He did that on the 25th of November last year. Now, there's no other way. It's the only way we can get on top of this disease. But it is 2.5 months later, and only 12,900 vaccines that were locally manufactured. We have not started with this blanket vaccination. And we have seen this spread of the disease spiking in the meantime. And he did not change the regulations. I mean, the regulations comes from 1985. It is based on the law of 1984. The regulations were written for managing the foot and mouth disease in the red zone and the blue zone around the Kruger National Park. It was not written for blanket vaccination. To give you an example, one of the regulations says a veterinarian which vaccinated your cattle will not be allowed to go onto another farm within 5 days after having vaccinated cattle. Now, it is because the law assumes that he had been vaccinated sick cattle, sick animals. Now we are vaccinating healthy animals, and there's no reason why that veterinarian cannot go to 10 other farms on the same day. Had the minister asked us inside on the 25th of November to draft him new regulations, we would have given it to him in 24 hours. And I'm pretty sure other organizations could have done it too. There's no reason why nearly 3 months later, industry has not even been approached to give inputs for new regulations, and it's unforgivable. Now, the third thing the minister did, which was very wise, was to, in the beginning, or about 3 weeks ago, he appointed an industry council with agricultural leaders. There are 9 of them, and that's the commodity organizations such as the Milk Producers Organization, the Red Meat Producers Organization, the Stud Breeders, TLUSA is there, Agri-SA is there, the Red Meat Industry Services is there, AgBiz is there. And they had this expectation of being given a chance on the strategic level to give inputs and help with prioritizing. But when the terms of reference came out, it became clear that their job is really to keep the farmers calm, to make sure that communication is good with the farmers, and that there is proper buy-in by the farmers in the vaccination program. Nothing on the strategic level. So it is still government officials calling the shots. And the farmers have absolutely no trust in these government officials, simply because they are the ones who landed us up here. And to give you one example, when we, as SAI, approached the Department of Agriculture in the second week of November 2024, showing them that we picked up in the data we harvest behind an artificial intelligence platform, where 68 farmers over a period of about 4 days asked about foot and mouth disease. And we gather from that there must be a problem in that district. Why would 68 farmers in the same district ask the same kinds of questions? And they said, yes, there is indeed an outbreak. We know about it. It has been reported by the state vet. And then we said to them, in terms of the regulations, you must immediately declare it an affected district. You must close that district for any transport of cattle, and then you must vaccinate. And the answer was, we won't, because the minister is not listening to us. He is lending his ears out to private veterinarians. So let he stew in his own juice. We will show him. And they only declared it an affected district 5 months later, on the 17th of March 2025. Now, you cannot let a fire run for 5 months and then send water to put it out. By that time, it had already spread across the country.
What is the competence of these bureaucrats?
No, you're asking the wrong person. If it was my job to manage this disease, I would have fired at least 12 of them in senior positions, replaced them with people with a proven experience and expertise, because we believe the state senior government officials are squarely in the way of us beating this disease.
Through incompetence or through malign intent?
Both. The director of animal health said to a group of veterinarians, don't put the pressure on me. You know, I do not have cattle myself. But even the minister, the farmers will not forgive the Minister Steenhuisen for saying, well, if they take me to court, they will wait a month longer for their vaccines to get to their farms. Farmers feel he simply does not understand how serious this is. And we are not taking to court to frustrate him. We asked the minister in a letter, what in law gives you the foundation for your decision that farmers are not allowed to vaccinate their own animals? What in the law or the regulations? And he chose not to answer. And it is now 2 weeks later. And we said, should he ignore us because we can't find anything in law, we will have to ask a court what in law prevents us. But it has since transpired from the World Organization for Animal Health, from Dr. Bruckner himself, from so many lawyers and institutes who said there is nothing in law preventing us. The Brazilians did that. We have now already done it last year. There's absolutely no reason.
So what happens next? Can the farmers in South Africa import directly from Turkey and Brazil, or will those vaccines not be allowed to land?
No, we cannot directly import. And this is not what we are asking for. We are asking for for importing to be done in private sector from the manufacturer to their local agents, knowing that the local agents are part of this network of rural veterinarians. So if they can bring it in and it can be controlled or gecontroleerd by government, receiving all the reports and the evidence that it landed here, that it is in that cool storage facility, that it had now been transported to the Northern Cape or Southern KZN, and that this dose have been injected into this animal, then we will be happy, because we know the minister's dream of having 80% vaccination before the end of the year. It can be done in a much shorter space of time. And listen, of the 14 million cattle, only about 7.5 million are in the hands of commercial farmers, where you have farms with cattle handling facilities and neck clamps and that kind of stuff. Let us take care of that. There are anything between 5.5 and 6.5 million cattle in communal areas and peri-urban areas. There are no fences there. It will be a tough job to vaccinate those animals. And the outbreak in Mbukweni Paarl now comes from those animals. All the individuals who have been seen with this disease in Mbukweni actually came from Khayelitsha, where there's a farmer with around 200 head of cattle that grazes the shoulders of the roads. When you get out of Cape Town International Airport, you see the cattle on the side of the highway. And those cattle, again, came from the Eastern Cape. And this is what is threatening our whole dairy industry now. So to vaccinate those cattle, it will mean somebody needs to catch them, to get them into cattle handling facilities, and then inject them, because those communal and smallholder cattle owners, they are not experienced in vaccinating cattle themselves. Let the state concentrate its capacity on that part, and let the farmers who know their animals and who live between their animals every day, let them take care of their own animals. This is our proposal.
Theo de Jager is the executive chairman of SAI, and I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.